Hello and welcome to today's edition of the Listening Lounge. My name is Nick Day and I'm CEO of JGA Recruitment Group, and we're specialist payroll and HR recruiters. Now, they say the quieter we are, the more we hear, and that listening is the secret to discovering the greatest of stories. So sit back, relax, and enjoy today's fantastic guest. Now, today I'm really excited because I'm joined by John Obidipe, someone who formerly worked as a senior business analyst and business-focused change professional for over 10 years, where he was focused on strategic business change and process development before he pivoted and became a Gallup certified performance and development coach. You have a real passion for what I would term positive psychology, focusing on strengths, not focusing on weaknesses, not necessarily looking backwards, looking forwards. So I wonder if you could just tell the listeners a little bit more about your ethos, I guess, but also more importantly, what is a unique strength? Because that's really, certainly in my experience of working with you, that's what we focus on. We focus on strengths, not on weaknesses. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so if I talk about my ethos first, my ethos is all about looking at where a person is good, where they are great, what positive things that they have to give to the world. And so on my journey of trying to work out how I enter this world of coaching, I stumbled upon a company called Gallup. And so they shared my ethos and I really connected with their ethos. They have a method around positive psychology. So the general premise is, for years, and I say this to all of my clients, so they would have all heard this many times before, but for years, coming from childhood, and I've got 3 kids, so I know this very well, we talk to our kids, and as they age, the teenagers into sort of first jobs, all about what they're doing wrong, what they could improve on. But rarely is there a focus on the things that they actually do really, really well. And rarely is there a massive push to really expand on those things that are really, really good. You might see in areas around football or, I don't know, particular individual areas, but not where a person is taken in terms of all of the things that they do well and those things magnified, those things maximized. So when we look at the Gallup approach, they use something called Strength Finder, which is a fantastic tool that really helps people understand what their unique strengths are. And so we put people through an assessment which uncovers all of these talents or strengths, and it shows from a range of areas what they are naturally, and natural is the key word there, what they're naturally inclined to be good at, what they naturally excel at without even trying, what is innate to them, so they can't turn it off, it's just natural to them. And we focus on how those strengths can be maximized in a person's job, whether they're a leader, whether they're a manager, or just a professional. How can those strengths and be maximized? But to really answer your question, the strength is something which is a natural ability that somebody has, a way that they think, a way that they behave, a way that they process things, which they just cannot turn off. It's just totally innate to them.
Amazing. We'll go into a little bit more about some of my results perhaps later on to bring that into context, because there were some interesting learnings from my perspective. And I think it was interesting when we met, I tended to focus on my own negatives or how I perceive negatives, and you kept repivoting and going, let's look at it a different way. So and I highlight that now because it must have played a part in the way, in the reasoning that you decided to follow the path you have in taking the Gallup approach. So where does all this come from? You said you were working in change, you're in the pandemic, you realized you're already coaching and it's something that you loved. But coaching is a very, very broad industry, and we can focus in many disciplines. Some are very niche, some are life coaches, executive coaches, specialist coaches in trying to quit a particular habit, whatever it might be. And you focus very much on strengths and positive psychology. I wonder if you can just tell the audience what positive psychology is, because I think it's a term we're hearing a lot about, but people aren't necessarily fully familiar with the term yet, and why that was a kind of a path that really appealed to you.
Absolutely. So if I go again back to referencing Gallup, Gallup was started by a man called Donald Clifton, and he did an initial study which really looking at why leaders across the world are successful. And he focused on a full range, so there was no specificity to America or to the UK or to APAC. But what he found was that across the spectrum, old and young, leaders arrived at success in multiple different ways, but they all still arrived at success. So there was no one way to be excellent or to be successful. And so the more he studied, the more he found these groupings or these themes that were apparent patterns across those success methods that people used. And so what he decided to do is take these 34 themes that he'd really identified and identify them with particular names, which we could now call strengths. And so these strengths can now be seen within individuals after going through an assessment to really understand, I'm more naturally inclined towards getting to success through this method or through that method, or using this ability or through this process of thinking. And so that's what we now term as strengths now. And so with this understanding, I can now look at myself in the mirror and see the things that I'm naturally strong at, and my actual route to success being through those methods. And so now as a coach, what I was really drawn to is the fact that nobody has to be the same as the next person.
Yeah.
We can all reach success, but it's going to be for our own unique way of doing it and our own unique combinations of doing it. But actually through those unique ways, we will all still arrive there. So let's all get focused on the way that we specifically get to success.
I really like that approach, because when we talked about leadership offline,
yeah.
we sometimes think there's a cookie cutter approach to what a good leader is. And we look right or we look left and go, I wish I had that skill, or I wish I was more like that. And we sometimes therefore think that we're inadequate, or we lack the skills required to be a good leader. But actually, as you mentioned to me, offline, is the Clifton report really showed that there is no specific formula for what strengths make a great leader. And there are great leaders with all different types of strength profiles. And then when we did the assessment, of course, what I predicted would be my top strengths actually weren't necessarily what came out. And they were in the top 10, but they weren't number 1 and they weren't number 2 and necessarily in the places that I thought they would be. And it was only really when we got under the cover of some of that stuff that I did end up in full agreement with where the strengths lied by the end of the conversation that we had. It took a little getting me there. But you also uncover things about yourself that I found were really, really useful in the way we do things day to day. So to give the audience a very quick, and there may be people that resonate with this. One example was, a lot of people say that, or my wife in particular, will often say, Nick, you're never present. Your mind's always somewhere else. You're never present. And I feel like I am being present, but we're watching a movie or we're talking about a problem or a business or whatever it might be. And I'm already thinking about how to solve whatever it is that's in front of me. So I am present. It's just my mind's raced on. And my number one thing that came back was strategic thinking. And when we looked at the strength report, you said, if me and my wife are looking at the same view, she's enjoying the view and she's present in inverted commas. I'm still present, but I'm already thinking about what I can do with that view, or how I might better utilize that in a different way. And it was really interesting to think for me, that's not a weakness then, because I had a concern internally, which I hadn't expressed to anybody. Even the first time I've done it publicly would be now, but I thought I had a problem where I could never be present.
Yes.
And it's just understanding that mindset really made me think, it's not even a weakness, actually. It's a strength. If I understand it, then I can hone it. I can use it to as a strength in that way. That was one example that I had, but there must be other examples you've had with clients which have really opened their thinking to enable them to be more effective. I wonder if you can share, and I hope the example I gave is a good one, but if you've got any others to share.
It's a fantastic one, and honestly, it warms my heart, because it's too often that throughout the kind of school years or the earlier years of a person's life, they're told these things constantly, that you are to this, you are to that, you're not enough this or not enough that. And actually, because somebody doesn't measure up to the cookie cutter or the shape that somebody else has in their mind, then suddenly they're not enough in themselves. And that's always frustrated me, because just because you can't recognize the brilliance in somebody's approach doesn't mean it's not brilliant. But I get it. If you don't have that knowledge, you don't recognize the brilliance. But I'm so happy that I can bring that to light for people. So in that case, your mind is super fast. It's constantly running ahead to see what is next. And if we apply that into that business context, you can see that in a meeting, as somebody's making a particular suggestion about a particular way we could go, your mind will be thinking 5-10 steps ahead and seeing where the pitfalls could be and seeing how we can navigate across that. Someone might have the idea, but not necessarily have the method to get there, whereas you're already on that method. So you're already adding value to that conversation as soon as you start to offload what's in your mind about that suggestion, which is fantastic.
So if someone's listening to this and they want to find out what their strengths are, and I recommend everyone does this. You know, I'm actually to give some credence to this. It's not me just saying it. I've got my wife now to do the assessment, as you know. She hasn't done it yet, but I'm really intrigued to see how we fit together because we're so different. And I suspect I know what her strengths might be, having gone through the assessment now. But I'm really keen to understand if I'm correct, and really keen to understand if it helps her like it's helped me. So I'm bought in. But to get the people that are listening to the show, if they want to know what their strengths are, what's the process?
So it's really simple. Either you'd go through someone like me as a coach, and we'd set you up with the codes that you need. But essentially, you'd be going through a 30-minute assessment, and that takes you through a number of questions. Most of us have done these kind of assessments before, but I can assure you this is one of the most sophisticated assessments that exists. And so after that 30-minute assessment, it then spits out a report that shows your 34 talents in order. And what it does is then focuses on your top 10, because that's where you're going to have the most natural kind of connection to those particular talents. That's going to be where you most naturally flow. That's going to be the things that you naturally work through in terms of those top 10 talents. So once I as a coach get a view of your top 10 talents, I can then take you through and help you really understand who you are through your talents. Now, you don't necessarily have to go through a coach. You can just look at your top 10 and it gives you so much information from the reports that you get back. That might be enough for some people. But for some people, they want to really push forward and become the very best that they can be. And this is the very starting point, just understanding that top 10 and having a coach really run through the pros, the challenges, the things to really unlock the best out of those talents and how they work together. As I said, it's not just 10 that work independently. Actually, there's some dynamics that work together when you have one talent next to another, or one with another 3. So a coach can really help you understand that detail.
Thank you for joining me on today's episode of The Listening Lounge. My name is Nick Day, and remember, every great conversation starts with great listening. Till next time.